everybody. Beth and I are delighted to be talking to you today. What we're going to be doing is talking you through a case study on how museum selection optimise their marketing budget using customer insight. But first of all, we'll introduce ourselves. So next slide. There we go.
Perfect. Hi.
Beth will introduce herself first.
Hi everyone. So I'm Beth. I'm the e-commerce manager at Museum Selection Limited.
And my name's Lara Bonney. I'm one of the co-founders of the Tapestry Agency. We set up the Tapestry about 3 years ago. Before setting up Tapestry, I was briefly Chief Marketing Officer for a fashion brand called Long Tall Sally. And before that, I was Managing Director of the Abacus Alliance, which is an Epsilon-owned brand. So next slide. So what we'll do is Beth and I will tell you about who the Tapestry Agency is and who Museum Selection are. So we'll start with the Tapestry Agency. So what do we do? Well, we help multi-channel retailers grow faster and more profitably. How do we do this? Well, we pull customer data together. We analyze it to create insight on customer behavior, and then use that information to guide marketing strategy and tactics. And so the objective is to help retailers to recruit more customers, retain them, and to measure their marketing activity more effectively so that they can optimize their marketing budget. So next slide. Here's an example of some of the clients that we work with. So work with quite a wide range of multi-channel retailers, from the very big, such as WH Smith, to the smaller brands. And we haven't got their logo on here yet, but Liliella have just started working with the Tapestry Agency, and they're a much smaller size. So we've got a really beautiful range of brands that we work with. So next slide. Over to Beth.
Perfect. So who are Museum Selection? Why are you listening to us today? So Museum Selection Limited was founded in 2002 and is well known for 3 brands. So Museum Selection, obviously, with its home accessories and gifts inspired by 2,000 years of art and history. And then we've got Culture Vulture, which is a bold and unique collection of home and clothing influenced by design and cultures from a world well travelled. And then we've got Pure Jewelry, last but not least, which is a contemporary twist on classic styles, and so a jewelry and accessories collection embracing colour and beauty in natural stones as well. So across the 3 brands, we trade in the UK and France and Germany. So you can see there we've got Museum Selection, the brand that trades in UK, France and Germany, and Culture Vulture, which trades in the UK and Germany, and then Pia, which trades in UK. And we have 7 websites in total. So I think that's next slide, please. I might skip. Yeah, perfect. So our customer base varies across the territories, with the average age about 65 plus, mostly women, very offline driven, but 42% of our orders are taken online. So our vision for the business is to prioritize the customer and to drive growth whilst being sympathetic to their preferential way of ordering, and also to drive that incremental demand. Next slide, please. So we look to understand what works well for our customer and engage with them on a one-to-one basis. Like many businesses, we need to plan and change as the retail space adapts, but remain agile, which I'm sure we all know how to do over the last 18 months. So being a catalogue-driven business, we must operate in an omnichannel way whilst maintaining our bottom line, growing the e-commerce aspect of the business, and driving incremental demand. And this is where Tapestry comes in.
Okay, so next slide. So Tapestry and Museum Selection have been working together in partnership since 2019, so it's about 2 years now. And so what we do for Museum Selection is we build them a single customer view database on the Tapestry customer data platform, and segment that by brand and territory. We then create customer segmentation and build different segmentations for each brand in each territory to give a base layer of understanding of who the customers are and how they're engaging and how their behavior is changing over time. On top of this, we layer on a whole raft of additional customer performance metrics. We look at things like customer future value by recruitment channel, by the products that they've bought, but by the time that they've bought the product, and a whole host of other variables. We look at time it takes for customers to get from first to second order, second to third, third to fourth, and so on, with the objective of coming up with marketing strategies to reduce that time and to get customers to buy more quickly, more frequently. Analysis such as product category association. So if somebody comes in and buys a cardigan from Museum Selection as their first purchase, what are they most likely to buy next? So that the marketing that's targeted at them is more likely to be much more personalized and relevant with the right products. And we look at things like permission rates, lapsing rates, and a whole host of other areas. We also build bespoke models for Museum Selection. An example is the lapsing model. Now, what this model does is it identifies individuals' lapsing point based on their purchase frequency patterns, so that you can actually target them with different messages at their unique lapsing point to try and save them from lapsing and to buy once more. And in addition, we provide Museum Selection with ad hoc analytic hours just to answer any questions that they want to understand about their customers, even down to what's the future value of a customer that uses a free package and posting offer as opposed to a 10% offer, just to see that the marketing activity is having the impact on the customers and they're engaging with it. So we have all of this customer insight. Oh, we've moved slides, still here. So we have all this customer insight, and then what Tapestry does is we help Museum Selection to identify what's important in the customer data. So where are the opportunities, where are the risks, where are the biggest wins, and together we work on strategic marketing recommendations and tactics to say, okay, how can we now translate this into activities that are really going to engage customers? So once we've decided what the tactics and strategies are, we work together to execute the tactics. So the Tapestry team supports the internal Museum Selection team on some of the tactics. We'll also work with their agencies, if they're digital agencies, for example. And if it's direct mail, then we'll execute some of the tactics ourselves. As Beth mentioned, the Museum Selection customer is quite offline driven. So they have a huge direct mail campaign program. They mail 21 million catalogues a year across all of the 3 brands in the territories. And so working alongside the campaign planner extraordinaire at Museum Selection, Patty Millard, we plan all that to actually from start to end, doing the data processing, the mail file creation, and the real results analysis. List rental and swap data is also important to the Museum Selection business, so we output those files as well. And the partnership works through monthly meetings and weekly calls. So we work very closely and are in contact all the time. So next slide. But as far as optimizing marketing spend is concerned and using customer data to drive that, there are 3 areas that we help Museum Selection with: customer segmentation, channel measurement, and customer forecasting. So if we go to the next slide, start with customer segmentation. So next slide. So as I mentioned, Museum Selection mail 21 million catalogues a year. But what they found is over the last 18 months or so, their customer has become a lot more digitally engaged. Absolutely, that female age 65 plus customer, the catalogue is very important to them, but they are interacting digitally. And so Museum's objective was to work out how they could cut some of the mailings to be able to divert the spend into other channels, such as the digital channel, to use that spend more efficiently. So next slide. So the customer segmentation that we create for museum selection breaks customers down by spend, frequency, average order value, and crucially by digital engagement. And it's that digital engagement piece that enabled us to identify a group of customers to cut from some of the mailings. So what it showed us is because they are responding to the emails and the digital activity, they don't need to receive every single catalogue. So next slide. The outcome of the testing that we did was that we were able to successfully remove 50% of the digitally engaged customers from the remail from Culture Vulture. Didn't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater because mailings are really important to museum selection. So started with the remail campaigns first. So Culture Vulture, it was very clear, open and shut case. Yes, you can remove these customers from those mailings and contact them now via email and the digital ads in between times. And this is being retested for museum selection and peer jewellery. And the museum team say that having the customer segmentation is just helping their planning process to be a lot more accurate, and that their forecasts are a lot more accurate. So it does mean that when they're working out how to spend their budget, they've got evidence to actually make decisions to go forward. So next slide. Then there's channel measurement. So next slide. So Beth talked about all the different channels that museum selection are using. Catalogue, digital display ads, social ads, email, pay-per-click. Now, as we all know, each of these channels measure the performance of their channel in slightly different ways. So with catalogue, it's matchback analysis. With social ads, email and pay-per-click ads, that is last click attribution that comes through Google Analytics. And with digital display ads, that's something different altogether. They use incremental return on ad spend. When you take the results from each of the different channels and you add them together, very often they add up to more than 100% of orders. And if you talk to each of the providers of each of the channels, they all say, well, based on the performance that we see, you can double, triple the amount of spend in this particular channel and you will make money. And that's not always going to be the case because there's so much overlap between the channel activity. So next slide. So the challenge that Museum had is that with all the marketing channels that they've now got in play, customers engaging with both offline and online channels, and the measures that the suppliers are using are just not necessarily aligning. They just needed a clearer view of channel performance to make budget decisions. So next slide. So what we did was actually pulled the measures together and put them all in parallel and had a look at where they intersect to say, okay, how are these channels all interacting together? And where the channels were, where there was biggest overlap in the channels, we said, right, we're going to set up some incrementality tests to really understand the value that this channel is actually bringing. Now, you can set up incrementality tests in pretty much any channel. It's very straightforward. If it's catalogue or email, you just take a group of customers and you hold them out from the mailing or the email send. And then you measure how many orders that group of customers place and compare it to everybody else that did get that activity. In the digital space, it's a little different. So what we do to incrementality test is we do what's called twin towning. And so for twin towning, what you do is you identify two regions that are very similar in size and makeup. So, for example, Liverpool and Birmingham. And then what you do is you switch off the marketing activity in one of the regions and keep it going in the other. And then you measure what happens to the overall orders in that particular region. And what we do is once we've got all these incrementality test results, we feed them into an attribution model that fractionally allocates sales to each channel. And the output of that then gives the evidence to work out how to spend the marketing budget more efficiently. So it will say, for example, for this particular campaign in this particular period of time, 50% of the orders were driven by catalogue, and 10% of the orders were driven by social, and 15% of the orders were driven by PPC. And quite often not very many orders driven at all by affiliate, which is we sometimes see. But it actually gives the evidence to make decisions. So next slide. So how did this actually work for museum selection? Well, they did some incrementality testing on pay-per-click ads. And what we did was we recommended pausing those the activity in specific regions just to see what happened to the overall orders in those regions. Now, we got some very interesting results. There was a drop of 9% in demand across the test regions when the PPC activity was suspended. A 22% drop in new customer orders, 4% drop in existing customer orders. But even more interestingly, it caused a drop in other orders from other channels too. So it shows that the channels are really symbiotic, and one particular activity drives another. And so this information was able to reassure museum selection that actually the pay-per-click advertising is incremental, and that actually it justifies the spend that they are going to put into it. And when their digital agency is actually recommending that they do spend more, they've actually got the stats to back that up, whether they should or they shouldn't. Another area is we helped to validate the results of the digital display ads. Now, as many of you who do digital display ads will know, people tend not to click on a digital display ad. So it's very difficult to understand what value the activity is bringing. So the suppliers use this incremental to return on investment measure, but that sits very outside usual measures. So what Tapestry did was we had a look to say, well, where are these orders turning up? So digital display is driving the orders, but actually they're appearing as a last click pay-per-click sale, or a last click social sale. So it was able to justify the spend in the digital ad area. And it also identified that although the activity was designed to be retargeting to existing customers, it was also driving new orders. So it actually had a bit more value than perhaps museum selection were realizing at the time. So next slide. And lastly, there was customer forecasting. Next slide. I mean, as we all know, customer forecasting has been an absolute nightmare in 2020 and 2021. All bets are off. Everything's changed. At best, people are forecasting based on how patterns were in 2019. But for museum selection, their customer numbers grew during COVID. There was change in the customer behavior because more customers moved online, and it just became very tricky to forecast what was going to happen. So next slide. So what Tapestry did was we built a customer growth forecast model. And what this does is it segments the customers by spend. And it identifies how customers move between segments over time to try and give a forecast on, well, if you continue to do the marketing activity in exactly the same way that you're doing now, how much revenue are you going to generate in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years time? And what do you need to do to change that to achieve different growth objectives? So what will happen is that, a customer will come in and they will place a first order. They love museum selection products and they buy several orders very quickly value, and they move into the active high customer segment. Then as they start, their activity starts slowing down, they'll start moving into the lower segments, the mid or the lower segments, and then they may stop buying altogether, and then they could be moving to the lapsing segments, and then the lapsed, and then out. And it's having a look at those patterns for everybody on the database to work out how customers come in and flow through the database. And what you can do is actually say, okay, test different scenarios. What will happen if I add 10% more new customers, or I stop 15% of customers that usually lapse from doing so, or I get customers to increase their frequency of purchase. So there's all sorts of things that you can do with that. So next slide. So what this model showed Museum Selection was they were actually underinvesting in new recruits to be able to hit the growth target that they wanted for the coming year. And they were expecting too high returns from their core customers based on past performance. And 2020 was an exceptional year, and we don't expect that to continue. So it helped them realize that to hit their revenue targets, they needed to drive more orders into the business. And that information helped them to rebalance their ad spend sales ratio. And it gave them the evidence to be able to make that decision confidently. So you know that you have to drive more new orders, but then what do you do about it? So Museum Selection had already decided that to drive more new orders, that they needed more newness across their range. They needed more new products across more season launches to give customers more opportunity to engage. But based on the insight from the customer forecast model, we worked out that actually, if you can pull some of the newness into the earlier digital campaigns, it can actually have a difference. And so that strategy is being worked on currently. So next slide. So that's it. What do we learn? I think the outcome is that if your objective is to maximize and optimize your budget to make sure that you really you get more customers and that you retain them, the customer segmentation models and reports to have that customer insight to really understand how your customers are engaging is absolutely essential. It gives you the evidence to make confident decisions on how to spend your marketing budget. And at the end of the day, if you're able to make those confident decisions and the data is backing you up, it's going to result in more loyal customers and revenue growth. So that's it. And I think we've got about 5 minutes left. Does anybody have any questions? Not too hard ones.
There was one in the Q&A by the looks of it.
So, Beth, do you want to answer that, or shall I?
Yeah, so I believe when we took out the 50% of digitally engaged, it was from the follow-up mailings. So we decided that they would still receive the initial house mailing, but it was the follow-up that actually had less newness that we withdrew from sending to them. That's correct. Just reminding myself.
So how are you targeting a younger audience and driving online sales?
That's a good question. Well, yeah, so obviously a large proportion of our acquisition is through cold mailings, as you've already touched on, Lara. You know, we've done a lot of the data pools as well. At the moment, we are investing more in social, and that's come from the incremental measurement we were able to. Obviously, that's come with its own challenges since iOS 14. So at the moment, Museum Selection is showing really, really promising results from social. but less so on the other two, which we're working on at the moment. Testing, as always, and also in generic search. And obviously that's come with its own challenges of, okay, we need to make sure this is profitable spend, and testing demographics in with those generic campaigns, making sure we're not spending money on such a younger audience that isn't going to convert with us. We don't present our products in the way to target 25 to 35 year olds, but we can target ads to certain demographics above 35 or 45, and that's something we're testing at the moment.
Oh, another question. So do you think you're limiting your recruitment of the older audience by only targeting through mail? I don't think you are, though.
No, I think from our perspective as well, we've seen in the last 18 months a lot of retailers actually reinvesting in direct mail because everyone was at home, because that was the most instant response. So no, I don't think we are. I think there's ways that we are working with the Tapestry Agency to improve the digital strategy and make sure we're finding other channels to recruit online, hopefully a younger audience. But at the end of the day, the catalogue, is still generating new customers profitably, and we shouldn't, cut that off. Especially over the last 18 months, we've certainly seen more traffic driven on site as well.
So have you tried alternative formats, direct mail for digitally engaged customers? If the direct mail is simply a prompt to browse the website, you could be mailing a smaller book letter, etc.
That's an interesting question. So that's something that we've talked with David quite a lot about, actually. Testing postcards, which I believe is going to be a test next year. It wasn't something we were able to do this year. And also follow-up letters have been really important for us this season. So, just kind of reaching out to our best customers that haven't converted with us and reminding them, why we're great, but also why they've made the right decision. And we have tested it. It's an area that we still will try to test, and try different formats as well.